The city streets had begun to empty as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of crimson and deep purple. The faint glow of shop signs flickered against the cracked sidewalks, and the air carried the sharp chill of early winter. For most people, it was the hour to rush home to warm food and family. But for some, the night meant another battle with hunger, another night of cold concrete. Anna clutched her worn-out coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked home from her shift at the small diner where she worked. The job didn't pay much, just enough to cover her rent in the tiny apartment above a laundromat and buy simple groceries. She had long given up the luxuries of life, living paycheck to paycheck. Yet despite her own hardships, she carried in her heart an unshakable sense of compassion. As she turned down a quiet street, she noticed a small figure curled up against the wall of a closed bakery. At first, she thought it was a bundle of rags left behind, but then the figure moved, and the faint sound of a cough reached her ears. She hesitated, her steps slowing. Drawing closer, she realized it was a boy, no more than 10 or 11, his face pale, his cheeks hollow, and his clothes so thin they barely held together. His eyes were closed, but his small hands gripped his stomach as though trying to quiet the growls within. Anna's heart ached. She had seen homeless people before, of course, in this part of the city it wasn't uncommon. But there was something different about this boy. Maybe it was the way his eyelashes trembled as if he were dreaming of food, or the way his lips were chapped from the cold. She felt a tug inside her chest she couldn't ignore. She knelt beside him, her breath misting in the cold air. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him, "are you all right?" The boy stirred, blinking open a pair of large brown eyes that seemed too old for his young face. He didn't answer right away, only looked at her with suspicion, as though expecting her to scold him or tell him to leave. Anna offered a small smile. "You look hungry." His lips parted, but no words came. Instead, he nodded faintly, his throat too dry for speech. Without a second thought, Anna reached into her bag and pulled out the small paper parcel she had brought from the diner. Inside was her dinner, 2 pieces of bread, a bit of chicken, and an apple. It was all she had for the night, but as she looked at the boy, she knew what she had to do. "Here," she said, placing the food in his lap. "It's not much, but it should help." The boy stared at the food as though it were treasure. His eyes glistened, and for a moment, Anna thought he might cry. But instead he whispered, voice hoarse, "Is this for me?" "Yes," Anna said firmly. "All of it. Eat." He didn't wait for another word. With trembling hands, he tore into the bread and chicken, eating with a desperation that made Anna's throat tighten. She watched quietly, holding back tears as he devoured the food. It was clear he hadn't eaten properly in days. When he finally slowed, taking small bites of the apple as though savoring it, Anna sat down beside him on the cold pavement. "What's your name?" she asked gently. The boy swallowed and wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve. "Daniel," he whispered. "Daniel," she repeated, as though committing it to memory. "That's a strong name. My name's Anna." Daniel looked at her with wide eyes, still uncertain why this stranger had stopped to help him. Why did you give me your food? Don't you need it?" Anna gave a soft laugh, though her stomach twisted at the truth. "Maybe I do, but you needed it more. Sometimes, that's what matters." For the first time, Daniel smiled, a small, fragile smile that lit up his weary face. "Thank you," he murmured. Anna reached out and patted his thin shoulder. "Promise me something, Daniel. No matter how hard things get, don't lose hope. Someday you'll grow strong, and maybe you'll help someone else, the way I helped you tonight." He nodded slowly, the apple still in his hands. "I promise." The streetlight above them flickered, casting long shadows on the ground. In that fleeting moment, under the dim glow of the city, Anna and Daniel shared something rare, a connection born not of blood but of kindness. Neither of them knew how much that single act would shape their futures. But for now, it was enough. The days that followed their first meeting became a quiet rhythm that Anna soon grew used to. Every evening after her long shift at the diner, she would stop by the same street corner, half expecting to see Daniel curled up by the bakery wall. And most nights, he was there, waiting with those wide brown eyes that seemed to brighten the moment he spotted her. At first, Daniel was hesitant, shy, and guarded. But little by little, trust began to grow between them. Anna would often bring him leftovers from the diner, carefully wrapped in napkins and placed in her bag as though she were carrying something precious. Sometimes it was a sandwich and soup, other nights it was nothing more than bread and fruit. But to Daniel, It was a feast each time. "Don't eat so fast," Anna would remind him gently, smiling as she watched him wolf down the food. "You'll give yourself a stomachache." Daniel would grin sheepishly, crumbs on his lips, and reply, "I'm just scared it'll disappear if I don't eat quickly." Those words stayed with Anna long after she returned to her small apartment. How many nights had this boy gone hungry before she found him? How many times had he fallen asleep shivering, praying for food that never came? The thought broke her heart. One evening, as the wind bit sharper and the nights grew colder, Anna brought an old woolen scarf she had owned for years. It was frayed at the ends, but still warm. She wrapped it around Daniel's thin neck, ignoring his protests. "You'll catch a cold without it," she said firmly. He touched the scarf, his eyes misty. "Anna, no one's ever cared about me like this." Her throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "Well, get used to it. You deserve kindness, Daniel. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." For a brief time, despite her struggles, Anna found a sense of purpose in looking out for him. He reminded her of innocence, of the fragility of life, and of the power of small acts of love. But one night, when Anna arrived at the bakery wall, Daniel wasn't there. She waited, scanning the street with worried eyes, but only shadows stared back at her. Maybe he was late, she thought. Maybe he'd found another corner. The next evening she returned again, still no sign of him. By the third night, a deep unease settled into her heart. She asked around, but no one had seen the boy. The streets had swallowed him, as they often did with children who lived on the edge of survival. Anna sat down on the cold pavement where Daniel used to curl up, her scarf still tied in a neat knot on his neck in her memory. She whispered into the night, "I hope you're safe, Daniel. I hope you find a better tomorrow." But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Eventually, Anna had to accept that Daniel was gone. Perhaps he had wandered to another part of the city. Perhaps someone had taken him in, or perhaps the streets had claimed him forever. Still, she never forgot the look in his eyes that night when he had promised, "I won't lose hope." Years later, whenever Anna passed by the bakery wall, her heart would ache with a bittersweet memory. She couldn't help but wonder, did Daniel ever remember her? Did he survive? In her soul, she clung to a quiet faith that her kindness had not been wasted, that somewhere out there the boy she had saved was still holding on to hope. She never could have imagined how that promise would one day come back to change her life in ways she could not begin to dream. The years drifted by, and with them, Anna's life became a routine of quiet endurance. She was no stranger to struggle, but as she grew older, the weight of survival seemed heavier. The little diner where she worked barely kept her afloat, and though she smiled for customers and carried trays with practiced grace, behind that smile lived exhaustion, bills, and loneliness. Her apartment, still above the laundromat, hadn't changed much. The peeling wallpaper, the leaky faucet in the kitchen, and the rickety old bed all reminded her daily of the life she wished she could escape. But even in that small, weary space, she kept a habit alive, setting aside a piece of bread or fruit for anyone who might need it on the street. Helping Daniel had changed her. Even though he was gone, she never forgot what it meant to give hope to someone starving. Sometimes when she walked home late at night, she would pass the bakery corner where she once found him. The wall still stood there, unchanged, but it was always empty. She would pause for a moment, the memory tugging at her, then continue on her way, whispering in her heart, "Wherever you are, Daniel, I hope you're safe." Life did not grow easier. There were days she worked double shifts, nights when she skipped meals so she could afford rent, and mornings when she woke up with sore feet and a weary body. Yet despite it all, she clung to kindness. She knew what it was to have nothing, and she refused to let bitterness consume her. Occasionally, her coworkers would tease her. "Anna, you're too soft," one of them said once. "You're always giving away your lunch or helping strangers. No one does that for you." Anna only smiled. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean I should stop." Still, in her quietest moments, when she was alone with her thoughts, the memories of Daniel would return. She could still see his thin hands gripping the apple she had given him, his promise echoing in her ears, "I won't lose hope." One particularly cold evening, after a long shift, Anna sat by her window with a cup of tea she could barely afford. She watched the snowflakes fall under the dim streetlight and thought of him. What if he didn't survive? What if my kindness wasn't enough? Her eyes stung, but she brushed the thought away. She had learned long ago that life was full of uncertainties, and sometimes all one could do was believe. Time kept moving. Seasons passed, wrinkles began to etch their way into Anna's face, and her hair held streaks of silver now. Life had not given her wealth, or luxury, or even family, but it had given her resilience, and a heart that still cared, even when the world gave little reason to. What she didn't know was that somewhere beyond her imagination, Daniel's story had not ended on that cold street corner. The boy she had once saved had carried her kindness in his heart like a torch through the darkest nights. And soon, fate was preparing to bring him back into her life, not as the starving boy she once fed, but as someone she would hardly recognize. The reunion was closer than she could ever have guessed. It was a gray Monday morning, the kind of day when the sky seemed to press down on the city, and Anna dragged herself to work as usual. The diner buzzed with the clatter of plates and the hum of chatter, but her mind wandered elsewhere, toward bills she couldn't pay and dreams she had long since folded away. She tied her apron, picked up her notepad, and began serving tables with her usual soft smile. To the world, she was just another waitress in a forgotten corner of the city. No one knew the battles she fought every day just to stay afloat. The bell above the door jingled, and a hush seemed to fall over the diner. Heads turned as a tall man in a sleek black suit stepped inside. His presence carried weight, confidence, success, and something magnetic that made people stare. Outside, a luxury car waited at the curb, gleaming like polished silver against the gray streets. Anna barely noticed at first. Customers like that didn't usually wander into her diner. She thought he must have been lost, looking for some high-class restaurant. But instead of leaving, the man scanned the room slowly, as though searching for something, or someone. When his eyes landed on Anna, he froze. For a moment, the noise of the diner faded away. A flicker of emotion crossed his face, shock, joy, disbelief, all tangled together. Anna felt her breath catch, but she quickly looked down, embarrassed. She didn't recognize him. To her, he was just another customer with an expensive suit. She approached politely, her pen ready. "Good morning. Table for one?" The man's lips curved into the faintest smile, though his voice trembled with something deeper. "Anna?" Her hand stilled midair. She blinked, confused. I'm sorry, do I know you?" He laughed softly, shaking his head as if he couldn't believe what was happening. "You might not recognize me. It's been a long time, but my name is Daniel." The pen slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Her heart thudded in her chest as she stared at him, searching his face. "Daniel? That boy? It couldn't be. The thin, starving child she once fed had been swallowed by the years, and yet, in the depth of his brown eyes, she saw it, the same eyes that had once looked at her with hunger and hope. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, his smile breaking wide now. "It's me. The boy you gave food to, the boy you saved." Tears blurred her vision as the years between them seemed to collapse in an instant. She stumbled into the seat across from him, too overwhelmed to stand. "But how? Look at you. You're a man who never forgot you," Daniel finished gently. "A man who carries your kindness here." He touched his chest. "Because of you, Anna, my life changed. You gave me more than food that night. You gave me hope. And I promised myself I'd make something of my life. I swore I'd find you again no matter how long it took." The diner's other customers watched curiously, but Anna didn't care. She was lost in the miracle sitting across from her. The boy she thought she had lost to the streets now sat before her, transformed into someone she could barely comprehend. A man of wealth, power, and success. Daniel reached across the table, taking her trembling hands in his. His voice was steady, yet filled with emotion. "And now, Anna, I've come back. Not as the boy you fed, but as someone who can finally give back to you what you gave to me." Anna's tears slipped free, and she could only whisper, "I never expected anything in return. I just wanted you to survive. And I did," Daniel said softly, his grip firm around her hands. "Because of you." What Anna didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Daniel hadn't just come to say thank you, he had come to change her life forever. The world outside the diner seemed to fade, as though time itself had paused to honor the moment. Daniel's presence filled the room, not with arrogance, but with gratitude so deep it humbled Anna to her core. "Anna," he said, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of years, "you may not realize this, but that night saved me. I was ready to give up. I thought the world had no place for me, that I was invisible. But you looked at me. You gave me food, warmth, and most of all, you gave me hope." Anna's hands trembled in his. She had spent so many years wondering what had become of him, never expecting this reunion. "Daniel," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears, "I just did what anyone should have done." But Daniel shook his head firmly. "No. So many people passed me by. No one stopped. No one cared. Until you. You planted a seed in me, a belief that life could be different. That one act of kindness became the foundation of everything I've built today." He leaned back, his eyes glistening. "After that night, a shelter took me in. I worked hard, studied, and refused to let go of the hope you gave me. Step by step, I built myself up. I started a small business in my 20s, and it grew. Now, well, people call me a billionaire, but none of it would matter if I couldn't come back and find you." Anna's heart ached with pride and disbelief. She had always prayed Daniel survived, but to see him thrive beyond her wildest imagination, it was overwhelming. "Why did you come back?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled warmly, his gaze unwavering. "Because I promised myself that if I ever made it, I'd find the woman who believed in me when no one else did. And Anna, I don't just want to say thank you, I want to change your life the way you changed mine." Before she could protest, Daniel placed an envelope on the table. Inside were documents, a deed to a beautiful home, far from the tiny apartment she had struggled in for years. He explained that it was hers now, no strings attached. Anna gasped, shaking her head. "Daniel, I can't accept this." "You can," he said firmly, "and you will. Because kindness like yours deserves to be honored. You gave when you had so little. Now it's my turn to give." In the days that followed, Anna's life transformed completely. Daniel didn't just buy her a home, he made sure she had security, comfort, and joy for the rest of her days. He invited her into his world, not as a debt to be repaid, but as family. Whenever he spoke of his success, he always said, "It all began with a woman who fed a starving boy." Anna found herself surrounded by warmth she had never known, friends, opportunities, and peace. She no longer worked endless shifts at the diner. Instead, she spent her time helping Daniel with his charity projects, feeding children who reminded them both of the night their stories first crossed. And as they stood together one evening, watching volunteers hand out food to homeless families, Daniel whispered, "Do you see this, Anna? This is your legacy. You didn't just save one boy, you've touched thousands." Anna's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy, for she realized that a simple act, one night under the flickering streetlight, had grown into something far greater than she could ever imagine. The story of Anna and Daniel became more than just their own. It became a lesson whispered through the streets. That one small kindness can ripple across years, across lives, and change the world in ways unseen. Anna never sought recognition, never dreamed of reward, yet her quiet compassion had given birth to a legacy of hope. And in Daniel's success, she saw her own reflection, a reminder that sometimes the greatest investments are not in wealth or power, but in the human heart. For in the end, Anna had given a starving boy a meal, but what she truly gave him was something far greater, a reason to live, to fight, and to dream. And in return, Daniel gave her a life filled not only with comfort, but with the deepest reward of all, the knowledge that love, in its purest form, always comes back.